Guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another Faith Friday video. In today's video, we are kicking off our Bible study on the book of Jonah. So if you're interested in seeing that, then keep on watching. So let's get right into this video. If you are new around here and haven't seen any of my other Bible study videos, then I just want to let you know that we have done a Bible study on the first chapter of Jeremiah, the book of James, the book of Ephesians, and now we are here in the book of Jonah. So if you haven't seen any of those other videos, I will put them in the cards up here and you can watch those. I'm sure you have a little bit more free time right now. So go ahead and watch those videos. And so today's video, I really want to come to you with the theme of you cannot run from your purpose. You cannot run from your purpose, right? And I just think that this is so important in a time like right now, because your purpose does not change even when your circumstances do. Right? Your purpose does not change even when your circumstances do. Even when you're no longer at work, even when you can no longer go to church, even when we can no longer congregate in the ways that we have before, even when we can no longer communicate with people in the ways that we have before, your purpose has not changed, right? Even when circumstances do. And so if you are using this time, if you are using this quarantine, this stay at home period as an excuse of why you can't start pursuing your purpose right now, then this video is for you. I created this video to let you know that you cannot run from your purpose, and your purpose hasn't changed even though our circumstances have. So we are about to dive into Jonah. There is 4 chapters, so we're about to do 4 weeks of Jonah. And then also, if you have a book of the Bible that you would love for us to study here on my channel, definitely leave me a suggestion in the comment section, because I would love to hear that. And I would love to know what you guys are studying as well. So as you guys know, if you've seen a Bible study before, I just read through the whole chapter and then I go verse by verse, just sharing any revelation that God has gave to me. So let's start with Jonah chapter 1. I am reading from the Modern English version, but you can read along in any version that you have. So verse 1 says, "Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, Get up, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry out against it, because their wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah got up to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found there a ship going to Tarshish. He paid its fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and a mighty storm came upon the sea, so that the ship was in danger of breaking up. Then the sailors were afraid, and each cried to his God. They tossed the ship's cargo into the sea in order to lighten the load. But Jonah had gone down into the hold of the ship, had laid down, and was fast asleep. The captain came to him and said, "What are you doing asleep? Get up, call to your God. Perhaps your God will consider us, so that we will not perish." The sailors said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this disaster has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then the sailors said to Jonah, "Tell us why this disaster has come upon us. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And from what people are you?" Jonah replied, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Then the men were very afraid and said to him, "What is this you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. Then they said to Jonah, "What shall we do to you, so that the sea may quiet down for us?" For the sea was growing stormier. So Jonah said to them, "Pick me up and toss me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know that it is on my account this great storm has come upon you." Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring the ship to land, but they could not do it, for the sea grew more tempestuous against them. Then they cried to the Lord and said, "Please, Lord, do not let us perish for this man's life, and do not make us guilty for innocent blood, for you, Lord, have done it as it pleased you." So they picked up Jonah and tossed him into the sea. Then the sea ceased from its raging. Therefore, the men were very afraid of the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. Amen. So, like I said, the theme for this particular video, for this particular series in the book of Jonah is you cannot run from purpose. You cannot run from purpose. And we see the whole idea of this theme as soon as this chapter opens up, right? So God speaks to Jonah, right? And Jonah was a prophet. He's considered one of the minor prophets. So Jonah was a prophet, and God spoke to him and said, "Get up and go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry out against it because their wickedness has come up before me," right? So God is talking to Jonah, and he's like, "Hey, I need you to go speak," right? He is a prophet. He is ordained to speak. He is a mouthpiece of God. And so God says, "This is your call. Go speak to the people of Nineveh. Give them a warning so that my judgment, so that my wrath, so that my anger does not come upon them," right? So that was the instruction that God gave to Jonah. That was his purpose, right? His purpose was to go speak to the people in Nineveh. And so right after that, in verse 3, it says, "But Jonah got up to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord." He was deliberately disobedient, right? He heard the voice of the Lord. He heard the instruction of the Lord. He heard the call of the Lord. And instead, he ran in the opposite direction, right? How many of us can relate? You hear what God is saying. You hear him saying to start the business. You hear him saying to write the book. You hear him saying to go back to school, to get that degree. You hear him saying to apply for that job that you feel like you are unqualified for, right? You hear the call of God. You hear him say that you are called to preach and teach the gospel. You hear what he is saying, but you are running in the opposite direction. Right? And in this book, we see that you cannot run from purpose. You cannot outrun God, right? So Jonah is given an instruction. He is deliberately disobedient, and he flees in the opposite direction, right? And in my notes, I wrote, God instructed Jonah to get up and go, but instead Jonah got up and fled, right? He got up and fled. And he fled specifically from the presence of the Lord. And we will see that later on. So it says, "But Jonah got up to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found there a ship going to Tarshish. He prayed it, Tarshish. Like, I cannot say this, Tarshish. He paid its fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord." So he is running from the presence of the Lord. But how many of us know that we cannot outrun the presence of God, right? God is omnipresent. He is everywhere at the same time. So Jonah, he gets up, he hears the voice of God, but he flees. And so he gets on this ship that is going to Tarshish, which is in the opposite direction of Nineveh. And so verse 4 says, "But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and a mighty storm came upon the sea, so that the ship was in danger of breaking up. Then the sailors were afraid, and each cried to his God. They tossed the ship's cargo into the sea in order to lighten the load," right? So Jonah is on this boat. He's gotten on this ship. And all of a sudden, a great storm comes about, right? God is not allowing him to be comfortable in his disobedience, right? God will not allow you to be comfortable in your sin. God will not allow you to be comfortable doing opposite of what he has called you to do. So there are some times when you are going to feel uncomfortable in your job. There are times when you are going to feel uncomfortable in that relationship. And it's because that is not where God has called you to be. That is not where God has ordained you to be. And so he has to make you uncomfortable. He has to bring some storms into your life so that you will wake up and get the message, right? So Jonah is on the ship, and God has brought this storm, and there are other people, there are sailors on the ship with Jonah. And so through this, we understand that your disobedience does not just affect you, but it affects everyone around you, right? The sailors had nothing. They were just trying to do what they have always done, right? They were just going about their business. But the fact that Jonah wasn't in the place where he was supposed to be, the fact that Jonah disobeyed God, brought this storm on everyone who was around him, right? And then we see Jonah, so they're worried, they're afraid, but Jonah had gone down into the hold of the ship, so he had gone down into the bottom of the ship, had lain down, and was fast asleep. He was fast asleep. And I really want to encourage you to check yourself, to check your conscience, to check your conviction, right? When you sin, when you deliberately disobey God, are you convicted? Do you feel bad? Or are you like Jonah and able to just fall asleep in the midst of the storm? Right? Check your conviction, because there's a problem when you can sleep in your dysfunction. There's a problem when you can sleep in your disobedience and not feel anything. There is a problem, right? So Jonah had a problem. He was sleeping at the bottom of the ship. And so the captain came to him and said, "What are you doing asleep? Get up, call to your God. Perhaps your God will consider us so that we will not perish." And so we see in verse 5 that the sailors, they were all crying out to their God to no avail. And so they come to Jonah and they're like, "What are you doing asleep? We're in the midst of the great storm. Everyone is afraid. Maybe your God can save us," right? And so the sailors said to one another, verse 7, "Come, let us cast lots that we may know on whose account this disaster has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. And so at this time, casting lots was basically like a way to hear from God in a sense. And so they would draw like markers on stones or sticks, and they would throw the stones or sticks, and depending on the way that they fell, it would reveal to them the answer that they needed, right? And so it says that they cast lots and the lot fell on Jonah, right? So at this point, they are understanding that it is him who has brought this storm upon them, right? And so in verse 8, it says, "Then the sailors said to Jonah, 'Tell us why this disaster has come upon us. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And from what people are you?'" Right? They're like, "Who are you, bruh? And why did you bring this upon us?" And Jonah's response to them is, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." And this was something that really stood out to me, because he says, "And I fear the Lord, the God," right, of heaven. But do you really fear God if you are willing to deliberately disobey him? So many of us say one thing with our mouth. We say that we serve God. We say that we are Christians. We say that we fear God. And this fear of God is like a reverence, a respect of God. But how do you respect someone that you don't listen to, right? I think it's in Matthew where God says, "You call me Lord. How do you call me Lord and not do what I say?" Right? And so when we look at this, when Jonah says, "And I fear God," in my notes, I said, does he really? Do we really fear God if we are willing to go against everything that he said? Do we really fear God if we are willing to be deliberately disobedient? Where is your fear of God? That you are willing to run away from what he has called you to do. That you are willing to literally hear him, know that you heard him, and still not do what he's instructed you to do. Where is your fear? Right? And so then verse 10 says, "Then the men were very afraid and said to him, 'What is this you have done?' For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. Then they said to Jonah, 'What shall we do to you so that the sea may quiet down for us?'" Right? We have nothing to do with this. You brought this upon us. So what must we do to you? For the sea was growing stormier. So Jonah said to them, "Pick me up and toss me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know that it is on my account this great storm has come upon you, right? So he's taking responsibility. He is understanding that it is because of my disobedience that this storm is affecting everyone else around me. So verse 13 says, nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring the ship to land, right? So he told them, hey, you're going to have to toss me over the sea. They try to get the ship to land, right? But they could not do it, for the sea grew more tempestuous. That means it grew more stormier. The winds were going harder, right, against them. Then they cried to the Lord and said, please, Lord, do not let us perish for this man's life, and do not make us guilty for innocent blood, for you, Lord, have done as it pleased you. And this is so important, because if you are looking at this scripture, you see that there has been a switch that has happened, right? So in earlier around like verse 5, it says that the sailors were praying to their gods, right? Lowercase g. And then when they come and they wake up Jonah, they're saying, maybe you should pray to your God, right? Lowercase g. But then when Jonah tells them who he serves, and they understand that it is God, the God of the heavens, that has caused this wind to happen due to Jonah's disobedience, now they call him Lord, right? So in verse 14, they said, then they cried to the Lord and said, please, Lord, do not let us perish for this man's life, and do not make us guilty for innocent blood, for you, Lord, have done as it pleased you, right? And now they understand whose presence that they're in. And so when I say that God is omnipresent, Jonah tried to run from the presence of God, but because God is everywhere, because you cannot outrun God, because you cannot outrun your purpose, the other people around him got to see who God is. Who is this God that you serve, right? And so verse 15 says, so they picked up Jonah and tossed him into the sea. Then the sea ceased from its raging. Therefore, the men were very afraid of the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows, right? So at this point, they switched from praying to their gods, and they started to pray. They started to sacrifice. They started to make vows. They started to worship the Lord, the God that Jonah served. And so this is so important, because even in the midst of your disobedience, even in the midst of you not trying to pursue your purpose, God is going to get the glory. God will get the glory in the end, right? But my question to you is, do you want him to get the glory through the storm, through your disobedience, or would you rather him get the glory because you've done what he has called you to do, right? But either way, God is going to get the glory. Either way, God is going to be victorious. Either way, what God has destined to happen is going to happen, even if it means making you uncomfortable. Even if it means that he has to toss you through a few storms, right? And so then verse 17 says, now the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. That is grace, right? Jonah's disobedience should have led to death, right? He was thrown overboard, but God appointed, right? Appointed, that means he told it to be there, right? He put it there for a reason. He put it there for a purpose. That was going to happen all along. And so even Jonah thought because of his disobedience that he was going to die. Because of his disobedience, he was going to be tossed overboard, but God said that he was giving him another chance. You may have run from your purpose. You may have been deliberately disobedient. You may not have answered the call, but God is giving you another chance, right? The fact that you are still here, the fact that you are watching this video, the fact that you are breathing, the fact that you literally have breath in your body when God could have took you out, God has given you another chance. Thank God for his grace. Thank God for his mercy, right? Grace meaning that he has given you what you do not deserve. Mercy meaning that he has not given you the punishment that you have earned. Thank God for his grace and his mercy. That you have another chance to do what it is that he has called you to do. And so that is the end of Jonah chapter 1. And so I just want to urge you guys that during this time, Your purpose has not changed. Circumstances might have changed. You might be working from home. You might no longer be in the office. You might not be going to church anymore. But church is not just the four walls that we go to every Sunday and every Wednesday. We are the church. The church can move. The church can go. The church can reach who it is called to reach, because we as the body are the church, right? So I urge you to be the church in this season. Fulfill your purpose in this season, right? God has given you another chance. So that is the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you have any comments. Let me know what stood out to you while we studied this first chapter of Jonah. And I cannot wait to see you guys in my next Faith Friday video. Bye.